by the recipient to the city, and then the city provides those reporting requirements to the state. And what I mean by reporting requirements is when you're providing a business subsidy, primarily there are job and wage goal requirements, and those are what is required to be reported from the recipient to the city to ensure that the subsidy is being used in the manner and the business is meeting its requirements. And also included within there is a recipient that I mentioned earlier, the continued operations. It's the minimum is 5 years from the benefit date, which is the date they receive the assistance. And there are certain requirements that you can discontinue the subsidy if they don't meet those requirements. So the other piece of this is within your policy, and the compliance are certain aspects. If a recipient does not meet their end of the agreement, then there's certain look back or clawback provisions for keeping the recipient in compliance. So another aspect of is and again, these somewhat overlap as you're reviewing the criterion and the use of business subsidies. But there's also review and evaluation criterion that's included in the subsidy policy, and they're listed here is again, when reviewing the applications for assistance and determining their business subsidy, there are certain conditions that you want to review as you're evaluating the criterion. And a few of the things that we look at again here is understanding that the assistance is, so one of the key aspects is the level of assistance is based on the fair market value of the property. And what we want to ensure is that there's not an overinflating of value or cost that's, again, driving what the gap is. So it goes back to what are the extraordinary costs of the project, what's driving the financial need, and how the business subsidy is a factor of that assistance. And the purpose of it, again, is to determine, again, there's the what qualifies as a business subsidy, and if it is greater than $150,000, that's what constitutes the holding of a business, or excuse me, that's what constitutes the holding of a public hearing. So when evaluating what the value of that subsidy is, you can determine if it's, again, here showing what the discounted rate is or what the value of that public assistance is, and if it does constitute as a business subsidy. The last piece is what's considered the business subsidy agreement, and this is really the terms of the business subsidy between the city and the recipient, and all of the terms and conditions of the subsidy are included within the agreement. And again, it includes within the agreement what the city is agreeing to provide as a subsidy, how it qualifies as a business subsidy, and what the business and the recipient, agrees to provide in return for that assistance, and that includes the number of jobs, the wage goals, the continued operation, and then if any of the other conditions that the city wants to include within the agreement. And again, in the agreement is all of the statutory requirements that are listed in the statute, as well as the additional requirements that the city wants to have included. So with that, I'd be happy to address any questions or discussion points that you might have relative to the business subsidy policy. And again, the purpose of it is in looking in the history of the city, we can't locate the original copy of the business subsidy policy, and it is recommended that the city have this documentation in place prior to considering providing any future business subsidies to future businesses.
Any questions for Michaela? Councilmember Thorson.
Yeah, I had that as a question about the verbiage of this is being restated, and was curious if there was an original document. And sounds like we're not able to locate that. Is there a rough idea of when? Because it sounds like this is a requirement to have, and perhaps we would have adopted that when we first established a TIF district, which I don't know when that goes back to, maybe the 70s or 80s.
Councilmember Thorson, to address your question, we went back in our files, and I think it was 2000. for when the city, this is maybe more history than you want, but when the city looked at doing a tax abatement project, which could be considered a business subsidy, in our documentation, we started with a master file for a business subsidy, tax abatement, and tax increment policy, but the business subsidy policy portion was stricken from it, which leads us to believe it was created before that time, and then so in 2004, the focus was on the TIF and tax abatement policies, which leads me to believe the business subsidy was created before that, the policy itself. But to answer your question, the other piece of that is, I can't remember when the business subsidy law went into effect, if it was 1999 or 2000. I can find out before the public hearing. But our assumption is because there was a lot of tax increment districts that were created after the business subsidy law was in place with requiring the business subsidy criterion, that there was a policy in place at that point. But the state only goes back, I think, as far as 2010 or 11, for which they would retain your business subsidy policies. So my guess, it was sometime between 2000, 2004, when it was initially created. But rather than try to recreate and without being able to locate it, that's why we're choosing the amended and restated. So it's saying that you've got one on, but we just can't find it on file. All the most recent projects that were done in the last several years would all have met the exceptions, which is why it came to us now when considering the next item on the agenda.
Okay. And then I guess my other questions are relating to the actual applicant's loan that we're going to consider later too. So that's all I have for this.
Okay. Anybody? Councilman Pearson? Cool.
A few questions, or something for us to discuss. And I think, part of the public purpose is about jobs, it sounds like, and then, some of the questions that I have are more related to actual facts and figures that would be a little bit helpful for me in terms of how many jobs, do we have here that are within, North St. Paul boundaries, and then what are our goals? I think for us, that's pretty important to know. And then in terms of, the jobs and wages, how much of that is low-wage work? Because 110% of the federal poverty, the federal minimum wage plus benefits is quite low. So is that something we're encouraging in our economy here, and something for us to just have discussion around?
So as we move forward to any business subsidies that we give in the future, is that what you're?
Yeah, I think
discussion?
it's something for us to consider to include in terms of our criteria. How does it meet our goals too?
Yep. And I think that's part of our policy, or that's part of the business subsidy policy. Okay, Michaela, if you want to just mention that.
Yep, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and that's a good point, that when you're establishing your policy and criterion, it's always a balance of establishing the guidelines and making sure you're meeting the minimum requirements, but then also, appreciating what your comments as far as you're negotiating with each of these individual businesses or companies that are coming in and requesting assistance. Again, it's making sure they're meeting the minimum, and so you have to decide if the minimum is too low or if you want to have it higher, but then also how much more you can get from them. So if they're proposing, X number of jobs at X percent wage, that's your, you've met your criterion, but you can always ask for more and try to get more of those higher paying jobs. So the intent of the policy is to meet the requirements of the statute, provide some flexibility as you negotiate with future grantors, but then also, I think it's a good discussion to have as far as what do we really want out of each of these developments, whether it's job creation, whether it's redevelopment, whether it's different types of housing. Those are all more larger goals that you have, and you try to accomplish as much as you can with each project where you're providing assistance. So, and certainly in here, we are at that low range, as you said, with, I think it's worded as many jobs as can be at 110%, and you can certainly bump that 110% up to, 150% or whatever, knowing that in each particular case, if there's another public purpose that's being met, you can hold a public hearing to have your wages set at, or your job goal set at 0. So you still have flexibility of how you word it based on what the project is and what your other public purpose objectives are.
So we have a lot of discretion in regards to this policy put in place for economic development, and
Yep.
and it is case-by-case scenario.
As long as they meet the minimum, right, then you can, and we also recommend that when you're entering into these individual agreements, as I mentioned, if they don't, it's always that balance of you want to make sure that you're setting the goals reasonable for both parties, so that you don't have failures because they say they're creating 100 jobs, but they really only create 50. So it's also each individual project, there is understanding of what is realistic and how it meets your goals. So that's another recommendation, is you don't want to set the bar too high and nobody qualifies. You don't want to set it too low and leave yourself short.
Does that help, Councilmember Wong?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and move into the loan agreement then, unless somebody else has more questions in regards to the subsidy. Okay?
I have one more question. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit, and maybe this goes back to the discretion piece? I'm looking at the land use portion and looking at number 4 there. It says highest and best use, whether the project will encourage and promote the highest and best use of land. So to me, that's a bit ambiguous, and I'm not sure if that was intentional or allowing for that discretion, or are there other criteria that I'm missing?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Wong, that's a good question. That's another one of those, you can certainly have, it is open-ended, and that's one of the challenges with, if you're going down tax increment financing and the but-for test, because it's always, but for the use of TIF, would the development as proposed occur, and also would you experience the highest market value on that site with or without the assistance? And so it is always, each time you're providing assistance, it goes back to a little bit in that fair market value of the land portion, as well as really understanding what is the subsidy from the city doing for this project, and are you facilitating, maybe an example would be if you have a large-scale development, and maybe without the subsidy, you might have a big box, but with the subsidy, maybe you get 3 stories of residential and commercial. So it might be that site might develop, but it's sort of how much development can you get on that site if there is a subsidy involved. And it is pretty hypothetical until you have a real development proposal in front of you.
Okay, let's jump into the loan agreement. Maybe Robert, if you want to sit on the very end there, you can share Dan's microphone if you need it, and maybe just introduce yourself real quick to the council. And
Robert Dew, Chair of the EDA.
so Michaela, why don't you go ahead and start off with what the loan agreement between the economic development and the North St. Paul hospitality.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, before you tonight for discussion is a loan agreement and the accompanying documents that, again, are between the EDA and NSP Hospitality, Inc. And the kind of a summary of the loan is that the EDA has proposed to provide a loan to NSP Hospitality, Inc. in the amount of $125,000 from available funds of the authority. And the purpose of providing those funds to the company is to assist with paying or reimbursing for a portion of the costs of acquiring and installing equipment located at 2526 7th Avenue, so the new mixed-use redevelopment project. And really, the purpose, the structure of the loan, it's referred to as a loan, but it's really structured as a forgivable loan, meaning that the business needs some assistance upfront to facilitate build-out of the site that includes the acquisition of the equipment, and the terms of the agreement between the EDA and the borrower, if you will, the NSP Hospitality Inc., is really to facilitate that loan, and it's coined as forgivable so that there are security provisions for the city and the EDA in the event that the business doesn't meet its terms. Stepping back a little bit, in conversations with Mary Ipple from Taft Law Firm, who the Taft drafted the loan agreement and the accompanying documents. The level of assistance at $125,000 does not constitute a business subsidy, but that's where the conversation started as far as the city's policy and so on. So it does not constitute as a business subsidy. You don't need to hold a separate public hearing for it, but the amount of assistance being more than $25,000 will require some reporting requirements that the recipient would have to provide to the city, that the city provides to the state. So it's kind of it's still a subsidy, but it's not the business subsidy that requires a public hearing. So the point of bringing that up is there are conditions within the agreement that the business has to meet, and it's a 5-year term, at which point each year 20% of that loan would be forgivable, subject to the business meeting their end of the bargain, meaning they acquire the equipment, they construct and do the build-out on the site, and then they maintain operations for 5 years. And each one of the anniversary years, 20% of that loan would be forgiven, at which point in 5 years it would be 100% forgiven. There's other language within the agreement, but that is structured so that there is, the city and the EDA do have security on the equipment, so that is the security on the loan is the equipment. And then again, with that 20% forgiveness each year, it does provide some additional security to the city that the business is meeting their end of the assistance agreement and maintaining operations. So there's a lot of documents for that summary, but that's in essence how it was structured.
It's a good summary. Maybe, Robert, if you want to just mention from the EDA the purpose of.
Sure. So when NSP Hospitality approached us about placing the restaurant in there, presented some of their challenges. And so that's, at that point in time, we started saying, okay, well, how do we evaluate this? Well, there's the public subsidy policy that we were looking for, and so that got born out of this original discussion. In lieu of that, and I guess concurrent with the development of that draft policy, we tried to understand the value that it would bring to the city, the need of the business owner, which they represented. We did a reasonable level of due diligence in terms of understanding what they would be bringing, looked at their other business sites, how they run their business, and that background, and determined that it did make, that there was a good exchange commensurate with the EDA's goals to get a high-level operator in that space, and this was the amount determined to help bridge that gap and get them in there. We didn't at the time have available to us established criteria in terms of jobs and wages and things like that, so it was difficult to tie it to something in that regard. So we opted to tie it to continuing operations to try to get longevity out of it. As we all know, we've had a number of food and beverage establishments that have come to town and not survived or for an extended period of time. So we looked at the continuing operations side as being the exchange, and develop a strategy with council to legal counsel, excuse me, not city council, with council to create the format of a forgivable loan. So essentially, if they stay here for 5 years, we are effectively providing a $25,000 per year subsidy to that business, although it's paid
And
upfront.
I would say too that through the course of the last, 5 years, 6 years, how many, restaurants have come to us and, we had to offer something, it's always been.
Many.
Something, you need an incentive for an anchor tenant.
Right.
Per se, to come into the downtown. And it's one of our goals too is, everyone's been yelling at us to get a nice restaurant in town, and, this is our opportunity too. But, I would say all the restaurants coming in, we're looking for some sort of incentive, and we never really, actually, I think one of the incentives was a little bit higher than this one that, one of the restaurants wanted. Actually, it was quite a bit higher than.
Yeah, I would.
Wanted, but we never did.
Right, I would say in exchange, it's certainly my opinion, and I would say the opinion of the EDA, the exchange for the quality and established operator that we are getting, and their intended plan on the site is a good value for the city compared to what we have seen from others in terms of their requests and what the exchange was.
And I could, maybe tell a little history on Brandon. He's a North High graduate, 1990, I believe, and he wants to keep the name Max Steiner, so he's going to try to preserve the history of Max downtown, and, just a hometown boy that really wants to do something good for the city, and he's so excited about this. I think he wants to open it up tomorrow if he could, but he can't. But I think what we're giving him offers him the opportunity to get his feet off the ground at a good start. And, I think he's getting some sort of subsidy from also the contractor, the builder, too, to help with his rent for
Correct.
a couple of years to also help. So, yeah,
That's a short version.
that's a short version. Any questions for Michaela or Robert or myself or anybody? Councilmember Thorson.
Yeah, I guess, so just to clarify, this restaurant, the North St. Paul or NSP Hospitality, Inc., they're not gonna be owning this space, they're renting from Amcon or whatever the ownership group.
They have a signed lease with the ownership group of the building.
Okay. And this equipment, in theory, is gonna be owned by the city for that 5-year period, so long as this,
I think it goes longer than the 5. We hold on to it until he leaves. It's always going to be there.
okay. I don't know what the market on used restaurant equipment is, but
Probably not very much.
probably not very much.
Not great.
So, this project got a TIF approval, it was a lengthy process, where Councilmember Sonic kind of had a procedural vote on voting no, because it needed a supermajority to pass, it needed 4 out of 5 votes. And, the building isn't even constructed yet, and I know there's just this desire and push from a lot of people to get a new type of restaurant that serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner and whatnot, but I just have a hard time getting behind this sort of business subsidy idea, especially if, this same opportunity hasn't been offered, or at least it hasn't been advertised to other businesses. And I'm just kind of questioning, if we go through this and this passes, what's going to come down the pipeline in the future? Is this going to be an expectation that, maybe not just restaurants, but any type of business is looking for a subsidy if we engage in this? And is that something that we should be doing? Because to me, we need to focus on providing the core essential services, and this would not be one of them. So, I guess just my comments on that is this is something that's hard for me to support and get behind. I understand the desire and the want and drive for this. $125,000 may not seem like a lot, but, again, I don't know what our EDA fund balance currently is. I don't think it's that. There's been recent discussion about potentially hiring new EDA staff. which again is gonna tie into that max levy amount that we can push each year, which I believe is in that $140,000 to $150,000 range. So I don't know. And then there's just the risk of, as you stated, restaurants come and go. And especially in the last 2 years, it's been real difficult. And this is high risk. And typically this is something that you would think a bank would get behind. And I appreciate and understand how other restaurants have come in and asked for something. I mean, I think that just kind of, if that's the industry standard, because people are so desperate to have these things and they just ask just to see if they can get it. But I don't know, that just kind of sums up my thoughts on this.
I think, high risk, restaurants are definitely high risk on the bank side, especially during what's happened during the pandemic, the last year, 2 years. But I think Brandon, with his background, he's got 30-plus years in the restaurant industry. He owns 2 restaurants. One is in Lakeville, one is in Inver Grove Heights, B-52s, very successful. And with his, being a local resident too, I think that's going to offer also, a good asset to that restaurant, being able to have the hometown feel. I don't know, Robert, if you want to comment too on.
Sure. I don't know that I could address every item you raised, but a couple things. First, regarding fund balance in the EDA, it was 324 and change at the end of last year, and will be even higher at the end of this year projected. Part of that reason is the levy that we do receive each year. Part of that provides for a full-time dedicated staff member, for which we have not had one for several years. Although we do have staff expenses that I think are allocated by city staff, folks that are doing other functions. So we have spent some of that money, but that in part has helped us accrue some of those funds, and as well as, I would say, good preservation of the funds that we have gotten through the levy. I think we've said no to a lot of things, whether they be subsidy requests or other expenditures that would put us in a position with funds in the EDA pool, if you will, that would allow us to do something if we felt it was the right time to strike. I do think that we talk about, Councilmember Thorson, you'd said that other businesses will come in here and look for subsidies and before they decide to land in North St. Paul. And quite frankly, the reality of development, that's what developers do. It doesn't matter if somebody is not fully committed to a particular municipality, they're going to shop their wares and get the best deal they can. And if we want to be competitive, as I think we all do, sometimes we do have to do certain things like this to get the right businesses, the right mix of businesses and residents in the city. And so I don't think that there'll be a discontinuation of anyone asking, nor do I think that there'll be an increase in developers or proprietors asking for assistance, coming in the door. But that kind of leads to the subsidy policy. Let's have a policy in place that we can all rely upon and make good decisions. And what is the exchange? What are we getting? I do think that the EDA debated this fairly, and feel that we are, and when I say we, the city is getting a good exchange for the investment they're making in this. So.
Councilmember Thorson.
I guess I was just confused because I thought the BP purchase was EDA funds, and I thought that kind of wiped everything away that was in there. But could have swore the last document I looked at that said the fund balance in the EDA was like $48,000 or something like that. But I could be mistaken. I'd have to follow up. I'm sure, probably put you on the spot there, Dan. You weren't around here at that time, but that's what I thought, you know, the EDA was building up funds to do redevelopment type projects. So you're saying that there's $300-some thousand currently in the fund balance today?
That was out of the financial statements at the end of last year.
Okay,
And I think this year we are generating approximately about $188,000 in levy. And if we do the maximum, which will come through our budget discussion, will be about 200, a little over 200,000.
so we won't need outside funding outside of the EDA, because that was my other concern, that we were gonna do some transfer from the electric fund or something like that to temporarily fund this and then do a payback, because that doesn't always work out as planned, so.
Currently, not for
Okay.
this action, no.
Any other questions? Councilman Rowland?
Just a second. So I'm looking at the memo, and I'm just have questions about who's responsible for maintenance of equipment. You know, hoods and things like that are subject to routine maintenance. Is that going to be within the operations of the kitchen, or?
That's the borrower or the restaurant operator. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but as part of the reporting, annual reporting, I think there is also a right to inspection, if I'm not mistaken. So we have the ability to at least take a look and with a trained or untrained eye to understand whether it's being maintained. But certainly, if for no other purpose, to make sure it's still there and didn't leave the property.
Councilman Peterson?
I kind of agree with Councilmember Thorson. And this is the first time we've seen it. I know there's been things happening, you know, with the mayor and, I mean, the EDA and stuff. So this is the first time that we've gotten to know this. So it's a lot to process. I mean, I don't want to be stuck, or have the city stuck with this loan. I don't know if I can support it either, but that's, I just think I understand, you know, the pressure of getting a restaurant, and I just don't know if this is the time or the one. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Council members, can you clarify whether you're speaking to the actual agreement itself or the policy as a whole?
No, the agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, the agreement. The policy I'm okay with, but the agreement
And I'm also looking at the memo and where it says, let's see, page 12. And it talks about the borrower has the right to prepay the principal of the note in whole or in part at any time. And my understanding is that would be maybe without penalty, probably explicitly, but, you know, is that?
That would be my understanding, but not expectation. I don't know the scenario under which that would occur, but the only thing I could think is that they would wish to shutter the restaurant and take everything with them, in which case they'd still be responsible on the note.
That's my understanding.
Right.
in terms of the policy where it says $150,000 is the threshold for a public hearing, how did that number come about? Is that from the state statute or otherwise?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that is a statutory requirement, and that's where the wonkiness of the statute is. If it's greater than 150,000, it requires a public hearing. But if it's greater than 25,000, there's some soft reporting requirements. And just to address kind of some of the questions, regarding the compliance, anytime, one of the benefits of entering into a subsidy agreement or a loan agreement is while you're providing a subsidy or assistance to a company, you do also have those checkpoints that you can put into the agreement. So as you mentioned, it's the annual compliance, the inspection, maybe not considered a benefit, but one of the trade-offs, I guess, is that by being involved, going back to the subsidy conversation, you do have the ability to have what you wanted added to the development. It's part of the whole negotiation is my point. And so when you're providing a subsidy and you're entering into an agreement, the city has the ability to structure it the way that they want, that makes you comfortable. And of course, that's what your decision right now is, what are the elements of this agreement that makes it reasonable? And that's kind of going back to any kind of subsidy or financing agreement gives that both parties that ability.
Would you say, Robert, that going back, 5 years or whatever, this has been kind of a priority for the EDA, and it's been vetted, through the EDA through the years in regards to trying to subsidize or, we didn't even know we didn't have a business subsidy in place. That's kind of why we're putting it in place right now. But I think, going through the EDA, vetting this opportunity that we have, I think it's dynamic. I think, as businesses come in and go, opportunities arise, and, with Councilmember Peterson's remark, that we're just getting it now, but this is something that we've been looking for, and this is something the public's been wanting for as many years as I've been on the council, a restaurant, a grocery store, something for downtown. And this industry, restaurant or even EDA, I think they need these things that are, I would say, like your anchor tenants. This is something that's something we don't have downtown. We do have the bars, but we don't have a restaurant that's strictly more food than alcohol.
Correct, and I would, speaking specifically to Councilmember Peterson's comments, attracting, business attraction and retention is a primary charge of the EDA, and for a decade, the tools that we've primarily used is to sell businesses and developers on the good things of North St. Paul. Not whatever it is that we had to sell, whether it is reliable power, it is a great community atmosphere, safe community, schools, etc. As we've put the pieces together, this is not. I would encourage you to not look at this as something that a business that just walked through the door and asked us for some dough and to make it a little easier on them, and we said yes, because that's really not what's happened. As I cited in our annual report, I think back in February or March when that was presented, we're bringing a lot of residents, a lot of new residents to the downtown area, and part of what we're looking at from an EDA perspective is, where do these folks go out of their home to get their services, whether it's grocery, restaurant, food and beverage, parks, et cetera. Where are they going to, where do they go to recreate? Where do they go to do all of these things? And to build a robust economy here within the city limits, we want them to stay here. And this is a critical, it's a critical component. So when we have a very well-established and good operator with local roots to boot, say that they want to do this and they're committed to do it, and they present something that fits well within the confines of, what has been laid out in, the redevelopment master plan, I think in part in the comp plan. This is just another piece to the puzzle, and this is the EDA's charge to find these pieces and fill in the puzzle, and this is one of those pieces. So this is, to the mayor's point, we've looked at. I remember, I'll just say 3-4 years ago, there was again, well-established operator that came into town. They wanted a lot of subsidy for their restaurant operation. And at the time, we just said, no, we can't support it. And one of the reasons we couldn't support it is because there was a very high-level concern, not about the operator, but A, about the amount of dollars they were looking for, and B, we didn't have, 300 to 500 new residents about ready to hit our downtown. So who was going to patronize it? And that was a real concern. So these things do take time, and all the pieces have come together, and we think this fits. I mean, again, that's part of the EDA charge, and that's, why we've been conservative with the funds, and we have the funds to do it, and, we're seeking council support on this for sure.
It's kind of interesting, when we look back at, a few years ago, I reached out to the Morrissey Group, and I think they're, a real established restaurant, what would you call them, a partnership? They go into, different areas and.
Right, yeah, they have a number of different brands around town.
Yeah, so I reached out to them, and they had a long list of things that they needed in order to open up in a city. And I think it was over, well, it was probably close to $500,000 is what they're looking for their restaurants. And granted, their restaurants are probably a little higher end than, what we're looking at here. But I just think everybody who's come in, every restaurant that's come in has wanted something. And I think we're gonna get a lot for our money for this 125. I think it's on the lower end, so. Councilmember Juan?
Yeah, I just want to thank you both for answering my questions, and I think I feel comfortable with how it's presented, and I thank you for your work on getting a restaurant. So thank you both.
You're good? Anybody else?
What's the name of that place that's going in at the old Subway there on 7th?
Two brothers.
Barther's?
Brothers Eatery, and he owns one up, God, I can't think of the name. Plymouth? Yeah,
Just out of curiosity, did they come forward and asking for anything? Okay.
nothing. And again, I believe that's a smaller, very small venue over there. I don't know how many seats it has. It's the old Subway, right across from you.
Well, it's not open yet, but they're working on it, but I just,
Yep.
one that came to mind.
Yep. Anything else? Closing comments? If not, we'll go to our next one, which is the parking lot options.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to just talk about this briefly. Morgan was going to be here tonight. They have done some analysis for maximum parking there in the parking lot behind K&J and making full use of the lot. We haven't had a chance to do full reconstruction analysis for that yet, which will be cammering the storm sewer that's in that area. And to give a better report, I think we're going to bring that to the next council meeting for discussion. But we will also touch on that briefly with the budget review and discussion tonight for monies that would be available for that next year.
Maybe also mention, we also did not get the property on 7th, is that correct?
That is correct.
I don't know if,
Yeah, that is correct. So we purchased, I'll call it the Knick-Knack Shop, I don't remember the address, out of foreclosure. The mortgager did not foreclose within their 6-month period, and in the following 7 days, a junior creditor stepped forward and did redeem the property. That, I can't say for certain, that might speak to a reduced fund balance in the EDA, but that money is coming back if it's not already back. With 9.75 interest and cost, which also in part weighed into kind of what we were looking at here. But the one of the ideas in acquiring that parcel was, in conjunction with this parking lot work, was to create a very affirmative, safe, and well-lit pedestrian passage from that parking lot to the to 7th Avenue. I have exchanged, Morgan's not here to speak to it, but I did discuss with him a couple of other options that may be available to still accomplish that in a couple of the other, I'll say flat areas, not the areas that connect the two that don't have buildings, none of which the city owns or has rights to, but I did discuss with him the possibility of connecting with those property owners to work in conjunction with the city to help create a, positive pedestrian connection. None of that is depicted on the slides in the packet, by the way.
I'm sorry, Brian, are you saying we don't have any bids or anything yet? We don't?
Not yet, no, we do not.
I did discuss the.
You got a bid?
I don't have a bid. Okay. I did, I believe that WSB or Morgan provided an engineer's estimate, is that correct? Right. And I did review that estimate with him, just kind of talked about what's in, what's out. And from my contracting experience, I'd say it's well within reason, for sure. And I would just add, from an EDA's perspective, again, another one of the puzzle pieces that we look at is parking. As we have more residents, we have the possibility of a restaurant, we have a number of other things going on. We have a great asset back there that, quite frankly, nobody uses because of its severe state of disrepair. It's not lit, probably generally seen as unsafe. There's not a clear traffic pattern from the parking lot, to 7th Avenue. And so I do think this is going to become vitally important moving forward.
It's a high priority for us in the EDA, I believe. So,
Yes.
is that it on that?
Yep.
That's all you got?
That's all I got for that, yes.
You got anything?
Well, it looks like whatever we do, we're gonna gain roughly 20 parking spots, which would be positive, right? And yeah, I would agree with that statement as well, that, it's been neglected for many years, and that, getting clear passage lanes and striping the lanes and getting it more well lit and more attractive, and, certainly people will probably utilize it more than it is now. So I'm glad that it's on the schedule of things to get done here.
Is there a possibility to take a look at kind of the complete transportation options that we have? Because we've talked about downtown bike parking as well, how we don't have it. We need it. Is that something that can be integrated? And then I know that electrical vehicles are of topic, and there's CIP funding for it. So a little bit about what that might look like in this plan.
I got this feeling we're going to, all of a sudden, we're going to have these new parking lots, and all of a sudden, everyone's going to have electric cars, and we won't be prepared for it. I think Brian, I think you're running into that with your department of what is it going to look like in 10 years, you know, with electric vehicles and all that. I
It has
don't
a
know if
potential
You
to
guys
be-
have conversation within your groups that how our city's going to handle this, and I don't even think a new city manager will be able to handle this, but, you know, if someone in the electric end, I think you're seeing it, and you probably see more than what everybody else sees, because you are part of the electric end of things.
We've had lots of discussion about it, and there's a lot of concerns about it. I mean, some of the loads that could be brought to a distribution system could be overwhelming if you're not planning for it, which with the reconstruction of the downtown, we did plan for it. We put a duct line in to make sure we can handle the wire size, the load size for, you know, charging of electric vehicles. It's also planned for the K&J restructuring of the parking lot. So plans are being made, and we're moving forward with being prepared for it.
It sounds wonderful that you're planning
need to.
ahead like that.
Yes.
Councilmember Wong, I would add too that I might be on the council meeting agenda, but I guess I'll call it committee for lack of a better term, with planning and EDA and council to revisit the redevelopment master plan as it relates to parking. The hope is, because EDA folks don't necessarily know about bike racks and pedestrian traffic, so the desire is that the planning will bring in a lot of those key components to us in terms of, you know, what we should have, what makes sense, and get that built into this plan as well. And these are very schematic too, according to Morgan. That wouldn't show any of that at this point, so.
Thank you. Yeah, I was also wondering about how that all timeline-wise, you know, fits together, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Will the windmill be able to handle all the cars?
We'll pick it up a little bit.
Yeah. All right, any questions on the parking? If not, we'll jump into budget real quick.
Yes.
We're going to have to, Carrie, do we still need 10 minutes before we cut off, or? Okay. So we got about 20 minutes. So,
Thank you, Mayor. We'll get started. We'll probably have to pick it up and finish it up tomorrow, but we can get started. So on August 16th of 2021, the preliminary budget was presented and focused on funds that are supported by tax dollars, local government aid. This excluded utility and internal service funds. At that time, the proposed tax levy was $5,829,630, a $339,184 or 6.16% increase from 2021. Based upon the recommendations to reduce the levy request, staff worked with department heads to reduce that budget. So where we are at right now is expenditures were eliminated. 50,000 transfer from the general fund to the street maintenance fund. Reduced Metro INET by $29,741 to match received 2022 pricing. Reduced fire and code enforcement overtime by $10,000. Reduced fire and code enforcement part-time wages by $18,720. Added $10,000 for HR software program, and added $25,000 in total compensation for the new city manager. Currently, the proposed budget is at about 4.7% increase from 2021. And from here, I will turn this over to Dan Winnick, our finance director.
welcome, Dan. Nice to hear that number.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, council members. First of all, I want to give a big thank you and support to Brian, our interim city manager. He's provided great leadership during this budget process. And actually, I'm very excited. I'm excited of where we're at today. Because it's not just a 4.7% levy increase. We started at 9.9. Last time we got together on August 16th, we were at 6.2. Today, we're at 4.7%. We really haven't significantly lost anything out of our budget. We've kind of done a little bit of shift. As Brian had said, one of the shifts was there was a transfer of $50,000 from the general fund that was to the street maintenance The street maintenance has quite a bit of fund balance right now available. But I think the biggest excitement is that every city council meeting that I have attended so far, in my short duration, I must add, but it's all talked about parking lots, street infrastructure, whether it's utilities and so forth. All of it comes at a cost. When we look at the 2022 budget, because of some things that had occurred last year, we were already looking at, and this is in addition to looking at a 0% levy that was passed in 2021, which I totally understand and I support with the unknown time that we were in with the pandemic, and still, we're still struggling with that today. And so any type of levy is hard to see for the residents of North St. Paul, and I understand that. But when we're looking at where we were at, we already had a levy increase of approximately 1.8% created by bonds that are going to be first paid going in 2022. But we have come up with a plan to offset that, to be able to take advantage of low interest rates. In working with Baker Tilly, we were going to be coming up on September 21st with a refunding bond issuance, which will save the city. Right now, it's being calculated at approximately $140,000 over the rest of the life of the bonds. Later this year, we have the opportunity to actually call the market value bonds that actually were issued in 2002 to build this building. They were refunded in 2012. There was excess money that's been in that fund balance. We actually, with our next tax payment collection in December, we will have enough to pay that bond a year early, which will allow us to go out and use and leverage the low interest rates that you're getting on bonds right now to go out and issue a bond issuance in early part of 2022 and have no impact or effect on the debt levy to the residents. We're looking at being able to do approximately $9.2 million worth of work, bonding, and utilization of approximately $1.3 million of ARPA funds. So to me, this is really exciting. And yes, the parking lot that we just showed is included on that plan. In addition, this is the first time, my understanding is this is the first time that we're really trying to develop a comprehensive capital improvement plan. In the past, the capital improvement plan was really focusing on road reconstruction. We've now developed a plan for your review and to look at. It's in a draft form that actually talks about equipment and vehicles. It talks about technology. It goes and looks at the environmental components to it, in addition to the road reconstruction. It's the beginning. We can fund what's on the plan for 2022. We're also in finance, we're looking at a tool that actually the city owns that was developed from Baker Tilly a number of years back that'll actually help us do a better job of playing what ifs and road mapping out in the future. Not only the debt, but the operating budgets, the capital expenditures, not just for the general fund, but also for our utility funds.
Within a program that is going to be used, or?
Yes, actually, it was developed by Baker Tilly. It's actually a quite extensive Excel spreadsheet that they've developed, vast for.
You put together overnight?
No, I wish I did. I actually very excited. The individual who developed it, her name is Patty Kettle with Baker Tilly. It just amazing. I asked her in our meeting if she could have it by noon the next day, so we could already start to use it. But that wasn't quite possible. But it's something on the horizon that's going to come our way that I think is going to be very, very beneficial. And part of that, another part with that switching of the market value, retiring it early, and then going out for a bond issuance, what it actually does is that it switches it from the market value of all properties to the net tax capacity. Where it really comes into beneficial for the city is because the city is what we referred to when I worked for Ramsey County for the Property Records and Revenue Department. The city of North St. Paul is a winner when it comes to fiscal disparities. In other words, we actually get more money from the city, which actually lowers down our levy. I ran a preliminary number, a preliminary calculation, just looking at that switching of market value to net tax capacity, holding everything else constant. It'll generate in 2023, it has the potential to generate approximately $110,000 of additional fiscal disparities money, which then lowers the burden that goes to the residents. So what our budget that we have here, that I'll start to go into at a higher level, and then absolutely looking for all questions and directions, I think is preparing us not just for 2022, but also preparing us for 2023. And so I'm very excited, and hopefully at the end, and we'll probably continue tomorrow, hopefully you're excited about all of this too. I think again, I give a lot of thanks to Brian and his leadership and allowing me to bounce different ideas off him and see if they float. So right here, so the next city council meeting on the 21st, we will have to certify our maximum levies. We'll also have to pick a TNT date and time. And so those things, when we're done having our discussion, we'll end up having to have a little bit more of a dialogue on that and where we're at. So I'm going to kind
Maybe
of
just mention to the new council members, once we set the levy, we can't raise it, but we can lower it.
Absolutely, yeah. And there is a possibility. I don't have the final numbers from Baker Tilly on both the refunding component to it, the refunding bond that we're going to be doing, and that'll be something that's actually going to be coming on the September 21st too, to start the issuance of that. The sale would occur and be final. I believe the schedule has it for some time, I think, in early November. But that has the potential to lower our debt levy, which will drop our levy down even further from where we're at. And so I'm optimistic on that. I just don't have the exact numbers to where that's going to follow. But yes, you're absolutely right, Mayor. When we certify our levy, it means that's our limit. We can't go higher, but we definitely can go lower. And I still anticipate that we'll be able to go, we'll save a little bit out of the debt service. However, I do have some items for discussion where it looks for some increases on top of this 4.6. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But you saw this chart last meeting on August 16th, where I kind of show you the comparison of the city, the HRA, and the EDA. And you can see what's in here right now is for the HRA and the EDA is to maximum, or to levy the maximum per statute, which will generate $205,000 worth of revenue for HRA, and EDA about $201,000. Those are 8.78% increases themselves. As far as the city, which is comprised of both the general fund and the debt, we're looking at a 4.7% increase. So overall, the levy increase would be a 4.93% in, with the city, HRA, and the EDA. I'm going to kind of quickly go past this chart. This has just been updated to show the numbers now. It'll just show the composition of what's in market value levy or debt levy, what's in our debt service tax capacity on that net tax capacity portion to it, and then what's in our operating tax levy. Total, it's $5.7 million. It's a 4.7% increase over the 2021. Some information that you had asked for last meeting was how do we compare with some of the other local jurisdictions? And actually, we are faring very, very well. This chart here shows where many of the cities in Ramsey County are at. They're on average, this is their preliminary estimated levies. They'll be, again, just like us, they'll be certifying later this month. But Ramsey County has a 1.55% increase, but don't forget that they added an HRA levy, which would have had an impact of approximately $41 per resident of the city of North St. Paul. But the city council, already having an HRA, did not opt in to that plan. And if you look at some of the other cities, from Arden Hills, which is ranging between 3 to 5, to Maplewood is at 5%, Mounds View 5.5, New Brighton's looking at a range of 7.5 to 8.5% increase and so forth. Where we're at right now at a 4.7 or roughly around that 5%, we're really where other cities are at within Ramsey County. So I feel very good about that. Again, I feel good that we're in that range. Don't feel good that we're having an increase for the taxpayers, but we're not out of line to where we're at. Again, estimated market value and estimated median residential market value showed those last times. It's still showing increases that are going on. The median value of a home in North St. Paul is now at $236,500. About a 3.3% increase over 2021. Here's where you wanted to get to is what's the tax impact to the city, to the residents of North St. Paul. What I did is I used the median value to take out the market value shift and impact that occurs. I certainly can show you the numbers with the actual median values for 2020, 21, and 22. 22 is 236.5. But what I did was I showed if you had a property that was at the current median value of 236.5 in 2020 or in 2021 and 2022, what was the impact of some of the decisions that the city council has made regarding the levy? And in your 0% in 2021, the resident would have seen approximately a $59 reduction in their property taxes. This levy of 4.7 on the city and approximately 8.8 on both HRA and EDA will raise the taxes up $36. So over the 2 years at that 236.5 value for home, the resident is still seeing an overall savings. Now bringing into some additional items for discussion. So took your lead from August 16th, and we met with all of the department heads. Again, we talked staffing, we talked if they were comfortable with what was being proposed, were there additional items and so forth to go through. So I have a number of different items that are here. Some have direct levy impact and some have indirect levy impact. One of the items that's on there, the very first one is COLA. The recommendation is adding a 0.5% to where we're currently at. I highly recommend we do that. Every city in Ramsey County has a 0.5% higher in the COLA than we do in our budget. I think it's a reality. Read a number of different articles. I think many of you have seen some of the same things where they're looking at, we're heading into some inflationary times where they're looking at, Social Security could go up the highest it's been in over 40 years, bridging close to the 6%. If we truly want to retain and attract talented individuals in our workforce, I think we do need to get ourselves up another 0.5% in what we have in our budget. I put another additional 0.5%, but my recommendation really is that we meet where the other cities of Ramsey County and around us are at, and that 0.5% would get us there. In this budget, you heard Brian talk that we had cut back $18,700 out of the fire and code enforcement part-time wages. This would be the impact if you were to add that back. What that was is that on the weekend, I believe there's 3 individuals that work 12 hours on Saturday and Sunday. The reduction of the 18,000 was reducing it from 12 hours a day to 8 hours a day. This would, if we added it back, would bring that back to the current state of the 12 hours. In addition, looked at increasing the mayor and council members' pay to $7,500 for the mayor and $6,750 for the council member. Thanks to Jenny, she did a little research to find out what some of the cities that are around us that have similar populations as the city of North St. Paul, where they're at. Mounds View is at $7,500. What's being proposed here, so is Arden Hills, so is Vadnais Heights. Little Canada is at 67 for the mayor and 58.5 for the council. We are currently at a mayor's at 6,400 and the council's at 52. If we were to change those to the 7,500 and the 6,750, it has an impact of roughly $8,000. Then we have a new police chief that we had the opportunity to meet with at 6:30. He will be sworn in. He's a fantastic individual. He's also
He's right behind you.
Is he really?
Yeah, he
I
is.
didn't want him to hear that. He's also from Ramsey County. He's looking at staffing and made the recommendation, and so we're bringing it forth for consideration to add a police sergeant. That would be about $138,000. And then those are the direct levy impacts that we've gotten so far from our budget discussions on this last round after the direction of the August 16th. The indirect levy impact, also these 3 items are from our new police chief. I do have a write-up to give a little bit more explanation, which I'll hand out afterwards because we'll follow up tomorrow with some more discussion on this. But it's to replace the record management system, which is becoming obsolete at the end of this year. Then there's the police squad computers and the police handheld radios. I've talked to
I think I might put you on hold now.
Sure,
just
okay.
Only because we're going to run out of time here.
Perfect.
And that's kind of getting into things that, yeah, it's getting a
More
little
discussion.
deeper. So
Yep.
we'll continue tomorrow for the budget, at the budget meeting tomorrow.
Yep.
Correct?
Tomorrow. Yep.
If you don't mind.
Oh, no,
Okay.
absolutely.
Robert, I wanted to thank you before presenting the EDA. Michaela, thank you for presenting earlier. So we'll go ahead and adjourn the workshop, and we'll get ready for the swearing in and go from there. Motion to adjourn.
So moved, Your Honor.
Moved by Councilmember Peterson. Second by Councilmember Cole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.